They said no maid lasted more than a week in his mansion. Some left in tears, others vanished without a word. But no one dared to ask why, until she walked in. A woman who carried not only courage in her heart, but a truth too powerful to stay, buried. He thought firing her would be easy, just like all the others. What he never imagined was that she would be the one to expose the darkest secret he had spent a lifetime hiding. Amara had always lived a simple life. Her mornings began before the sun rose, packing lunches for her younger siblings and rushing to catch the early bus. She worked hard, not because life gave her choices, but because it demanded her strength. When she was offered a job at the largest mansion in the city, she thought it was her chance, a way to finally bring stability to her family. The mansion towered above the neighborhood like a symbol of untouchable power. Marble steps gleamed in the daylight, and expensive cars lined the driveway. To Amara, it seemed like another world, far from the cramped apartment she called home. Yet she walked through those gates with quiet determination, reminding herself that dignity mattered more than wealth. At first, the job felt like any other, dusting rooms, polishing silver, keeping her head down. But almost immediately, she noticed something unsettling. Maids left the mansion in silence, their faces pale, their voices hushed. Some never returned after only a few days. Whispers traveled through the halls, but no one dared speak openly. Still, Amara stayed. She told herself she had endured worse before, and she would endure this too. But late at night, as the house grew silent and the chandeliers dimmed, she couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion itself was holding a secret, one that had driven every other maid away. What she didn't realize was that her arrival would set in motion the moment the secret could no longer stay hidden. Amara soon realized the mansion was not just a place of wealth, it was a place of fear. On her second week, she watched another maid leave without a word. The woman's eyes were red, her hands shaking as she shoved her belongings into a bag. No goodbyes, no explanations, just silence. At first, Amara thought maybe it was bad luck, or that the work was too hard. But then, she began to notice the pattern. Every maid who left looked the same, drained, defeated, as if something had broken inside them. The billionaire, Mr. Harrington, carried himself with a cold authority. His commands were sharp, his gaze lingering on Amara longer than it should. But it wasn't just his tone. It was the way he dismissed her presence, as though her worth was nothing more than the rag in her hand. When she polished the silverware, he inspected it twice. When she cleaned the library, he ran a finger along the shelf, searching for mistakes. And when she passed him in the halls, his eyes hardened, like her very existence was an offense. One evening, Amara overheard two cooks whispering in the kitchen. Their voices were low, but the words cut through the clatter of dishes. He fired her just for speaking up, said she was too loud, too bold. Another voice added, "Doesn't matter what you do. If you're black, you don't last here." Amara's chest tightened. The truth was settling in. This wasn't about performance or mistakes. It was about something much darker, something she could never change. But instead of leaving, she grew more determined. Each day she watched him closely, piecing together fragments of his behavior. She noticed the locked door on the third floor, the way he snapped whenever someone asked about it. She saw the files he guarded in his study, always shoving them away when footsteps approached. The tension escalated one night when Amara stayed late to finish polishing the main hall. She heard footsteps echoing behind her, slow and deliberate. When she turned, Mr. Harrington stood there, his face shadowed by the dim light. "You should know," he said, his voice low and sharp. "People like you don't last here. They never do." The words weren't just a warning, they were a threat. And in that moment, Amara understood the unspoken truth. This wasn't just about maids losing jobs. This was about erasing them, silencing them, making sure their stories never left these walls. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't respond. Instead, she lowered her head, pretending to shrink. Inside, though, she burned with quiet resolve. If no one else had survived long enough to uncover his secret, she would. What she didn't know was that the secret was closer than she thought, and the night she discovered it, nothing in her life would ever be the same. It happened on a night when the mansion was unusually quiet. The other staff had already left, and Amara was alone, finishing her chores. Curiosity gnawed at her as she walked past the locked third-floor door, the one Mr. Harrington guarded like a vault. But this time, the door was ajar. Her hands trembled as she pushed it open. Inside, she found rows of folders, photographs, and files stacked in neat piles. At first glance, they looked like employment records. But as she flipped through them, her stomach dropped. Each file carried the name of a maid, all black women, along with notes filled with venom. Too loud. Too proud. Doesn't know her place. Page after page, the same pattern repeated. This wasn't just incompetence or strictness. It was deliberate, calculated, systematic. And then, at the back of the room, she saw it. A locked cabinet left, slightly open. Inside were shredded contracts, complaint letters, and warning notices from agencies. Evidence he had destroyed, proof of the women who tried to speak out. He had built his empire on silencing them, burying their voices beneath his wealth. Amara's chest tightened. She wasn't supposed to see this. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hall. The door slammed shut behind her. Mr. Harrington stood there, his face twisted with rage. "You think you're different?" he spat. "You think you'll survive here? You're just like the rest, disposable." Her pulse thundered in her ears, but instead of crumbling, she met his gaze. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. The truth was no longer hidden. It was in her hands. Harrington stepped closer, his voice a venomous whisper. "If you speak, no one will believe you. They never do." But he was wrong. Because this time, someone would. This time, his secret had finally been exposed. For the first time, Amara refused to walk away in silence. She gathered the files, the letters, the fragments of truth he had hidden for years, and carried them beyond the mansion's gates. It wasn't easy. Every step came with fear. Fear of not being believed, fear of retaliation, fear of the system siding with him as it always had. But this time was different. She had evidence, she had courage, and most importantly, she had the voices of the women who came before her, echoing in every page she carried. When the truth came out, the image of Mr. Harrington's untouchable power began to crumble. No longer was he the man who could dismiss workers without consequence. Now, he was exposed for what he was, a predator of silence, a man who thrived on racism and intimidation. For Amara, the victory was not just her own. It was for every maid who left in tears, for every woman told she didn't belong, for every life derailed by prejudice hidden behind wealth and status. She had broken the cycle. But even as the world listened, the question remained. Why did it take so long? How many others had suffered in silence before one story finally forced people to see? This wasn't just about one man, one mansion, or one woman's bravery. It was about a truth that spans far beyond those walls, a truth about the systems that protect the powerful and silence the vulnerable. And as Amara walked away from the mansion for the last time, she carried not only justice, but a challenge. A challenge to all of us. How many more stories must be told before the world finally changes?